Okay, so just to introduce myself, my name is Devin DeLibero. I am the Electric Vehicle Program Coordinator. I specifically work on the Drive Green program. Overall, Green Energy Consumers is a nonprofit based in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, whose mission it is to harness the power of energy consumers to speed the transition to a low carbon future. And we do this in a few different ways, mainly through policy and advocacy work, but then also through our programmatic work. So programs like Green Powered, Shave the Peak, and what we're here to talk more about today is Drive Green because it's associated with electric vehicles. So just a little bit about the program itself. Drive Green started in late 2016, and its mission is twofold: to both educate the consumer about the benefits of electric vehicles, and then to also help people get into those cars, help people buy or lease those cars. Traditionally, that part of the website it's called an electric vehicle shopping tool, and we used to offer discounts from participating dealers on a monthly basis, but with the chip shortage, which has led to an inventory shortage, we have for the time being pivoted to a pre-order format. So there are no discounts associated with the pre-orders on our website, unfortunately, but we do still connect you to those dealerships and help you get the process rolling. We have seen some good news. So far, we have one Chevy Bolt dealer who's actually posting prices now because they finally have cars that are off the stop sale. Okay, well, I will continue on. So why did we choose electric vehicles? What made us think this would be a good program that would go along with our mission? Well, vehicles, gas-powered vehicles, emit a ton of CO2 emissions per mile. Especially in New England, they emit 381 grams of CO2 emission per mile. Now, if you have a plug-in hybrid, that's a vehicle with an electric range and a gas backup, that changes things considerably. It brings those CO2 emissions down from 381 to 176. A battery electric vehicle brings it down even more to 96 grams of CO2 emissions per mile. And I know I kind of went through this slide a little bit quickly, but you'll see that big thing at the end where it's talking about you could run on zero emissions if you have our Green Powered program. That's just a plug for our Green Powered program. And if you're interested, I would encourage you to check it out on our website. So as you can see from these graphs, transportation is a huge part of greenhouse gas emissions in both Rhode Island and Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, it contributes 42% of overall greenhouse gas emissions. In Rhode Island, it's about 36%. Vehicles themselves and the emissions that come from vehicles are a threat to public health. However, if you have an electric vehicle, you have no tailpipe emissions, so that's not contributing to any of the particulate matter that's being put into the air by your traditional internal combustion engine vehicle, or ICE vehicle as we like to call them. Now, if you have a plug-in hybrid, you will still have some stuff coming out of your tailpipe, but it's all depending upon like how much you run that car on electricity versus the gas backup. Now, electric vehicles are cleaner even if you take electricity generation into account. And so what I mean by that is that our grid is getting cleaner and cleaner every year. We also have renewable energy standards set in place in both Rhode Island and Massachusetts, which makes it required that the utilities increase their renewables on their grid every year. In addition to that, a lot of communities in Massachusetts and some new communities are coming on in Rhode Island that do something called community choice aggregation or green municipal aggregation, where they already have their utilities supplying even more green on their grid. And if you're interested in something like that, please do check out our website. And so as we know, climate change itself is a public health threat, so we want to do what we can, and we think transportation is something that we can help with. And then if you pay attention to the American Lung Association, they've done multiple studies, and they just had a report come out recently, which I would encourage you all to check out. But as for this slide, the American Lung Association says electrification can save New England $2.2 billion in avoided health costs by 2050. So that's that would help with a lot of respiratory issues, which is closely associated with the tailpipe emissions in higher density areas. Efficiency. So electric cars are way more efficient than your typical gas-powered car. And so not only is that great for your peace of mind, but it's also really great for your wallet overall, because it means you don't have to like spend as much, or you shouldn't have to spend as much on fuel. So gas-powered cars convert only about 17 to 21% of the available energy in gasoline into motion, whereas electric vehicles convert closer to 60 to 77%. So you might think, that's great and all, but what does that actually mean for me? And so if you look at this graph on the right-hand side, that translates into miles per gallon or miles per gallon electric. And so you can see on the left-hand side that cars like the Tesla Model 3, the Hyundai Kona EV, the Chevy Bolt, all battery electric vehicles, so pure electric vehicles, far outstrip your traditional gas-powered cars, even the gas-powered cars that claim to be hybrid or a hybrid electric vehicle. And those cars don't have plugs. In the middle, you'll see there's some cars with some green on the bottom and some blue on the top. Those are your plug-in hybrid cars, and those also get really exceptional MPGEs. Okay. And so there's also lower fuel costs associated with fueling your electric vehicle. So this math was done a couple weeks ago, so the average gallon of gas might have changed a little bit. But just from that snapshot, we can see, say the average gallon of gas was $4.31 in Massachusetts, which I don't think it's too far off. The equivalent e-gallon in Massachusetts would be $2.25. Now, if you're a Rhode Island resident, it's a little bit less than that because Mass electricity rates are higher than Rhode Island electricity rates. So that's something to keep in mind. Another thing that's really great about electric vehicles is that utilities tend to lock in electricity rates, I think, on like a 6-month basis. And so the prices are a lot less volatile than, buying a gallon of gasoline. And this kind of just brings that point home even more. So you have your all electric vehicles represented here all the way down to your diesel vehicles. You'll see all electric vehicles, their fuel costs range from about $500 to $850 a year, so it's really not so much. Plug-in hybrids, it does get a bit more pricey because you, again, have that gas backup, so it goes anywhere from $600 to $2,400. And though I do know some people who own plug-in hybrids who primarily drive on that little bit of electric range that they have. Then there's the hybrid electric vehicles that are just gas powered. They don't actually have a plug, and that'll bring you up to about $3,250 in prices and fuel prices a year. And then your gasoline prices far outstrip any of the types of vehicles I've mentioned previously, and it brings you to about $5,000 a year potentially. EVs are also great because they cut maintenance and repair costs in half. There are far fewer moving parts compared to internal combustion engine vehicles, and there'll be, I think it's the next slide or the slide after that shows you a chart of what those parts could be. So because there's less parts, there's much less things to service. Batteries are really meant to withstand the lifetime of the vehicle, so there shouldn't be too much maintenance required on those things. Batteries also are usually under warranty by the manufacturer to have 8-year, 100,000-mile warranties, and you can, fix it if you need to. And then something else to consider is regenerative braking, and that protects brakes. So that's another thing you don't really have to check on as often. And so regenerative braking is also called one-pedal driving. And what happens there is, you take your foot off the accelerator, and it brakes the car a lot faster than it would if you took your foot off the gas in a gas-powered car. It doesn't stop it completely, but you don't have to use your brake pedal as much because it slows the car down enough that way. What's also great about that is that it puts energy back into the battery of the car so it can extend the range of your battery. And it's especially fun if you're doing a lot of downhill driving. You can see that really hike up the range of your vehicle. And some questions I do get about this is, do we still have a brake pedal if I'm using regenerative braking or one pedal driving? And yes, you do have a regular brake pedal as well. And so if you don't want to take my word for it, I completely understand, but then you should check out the Consumer Reports on Electric Vehicle Ownership Costs. And so they came out with this a couple of years ago, and they kind of backed up everything we've been saying for years, so we were really excited about it. And I definitely encourage you to check it out. So here's the slide I just talked about, how it compares the different types of maintenance costs. You have ICE V, which is internal combustion engine vehicle, on the left-hand side. Your HEV, a hybrid electric vehicle that has no plug, a plug-in hybrid, and a battery electric vehicle, which is a battery electric vehicle is just pure electric. And so you can see owning a BEV makes your maintenance costs the least. They have none of those things that are like reddish pink. And they also have fewer of the parts in purple. I'm not going to go and tell you about all the specific things, but just know that the maintenance costs are a lot less for a battery electric vehicle and even a little bit less for a plug-in hybrid. And EVs save big on ownership costs, so they are more cost effective over there have been studies that have been done. You can see on the left-hand side that show the lifetime savings from EVs versus their best-selling ICE or internal combustion engine counterparts. So on the graph, you'll see that the Model 3 probably has the best savings overall. I'm not sure what car they're comparing it to, but over the total life of the vehicle, you could save approximately $17,600. The RAV4 Prime is pretty cool, so you can save about $4,300, and that's only a plug-in hybrid, so that's really great too. And so you can just see that generally speaking, you can save money over the total cost of ownerships of the vehicle. Okay. Plus, they are really fun to drive. People who haven't driven an electric car before have this misconception that they're not really fast, and they actually are really fast. The torque and acceleration are much better than your traditional gas-powered vehicles. And I'm sure there's other benefits or fun things about them, but that's the one that always stands out to me the most because I don't know, I'm a little bit of a speed demon. But this is one of my first stops for questions. So if you have any questions, I'm going to check the chat now. Okay. I see that I've done an excellent job and nobody has any questions so far, so I'm going to move on to the rest of the presentation. Okay. This section is about things you should know going into like potentially buying an electric vehicle. So typically when people ask about electric vehicles, their first questions revolve around range anxiety. And range anxiety is a term we use when kind of obviously people are worried that the range of the vehicle is not going to be sufficient for the needs of the car that they have. And we like to say that it's a thing of the past for many different reasons. One is that there are plenty of vehicles coming on the market now that have greater and greater electric range, which you can see based on the graph here. So there's lots of vehicles that have 250 miles of range or more, and there are a lot of vehicles coming out within this year and even next year that have around 300 or more. So really not such a thing to worry about anymore. If you're still worried and you kind of just want to dip your toe into electric vehicles but not make the full commitment, that's fine too. We have plug-in hybrids for that. So they have usually a little bit of an electric range and then the gas backup. For example, the Toyota RAV4 Prime has about 42 miles of electric range and then has a gas backup. So there is still a way where you can kind of get the best of both worlds. And then another question we have concerning range anxiety is about infrastructure. So infrastructure is actually getting better and better every year. And so I would encourage anybody to check out apps like PlugShare and ChargePoint before they get their electric vehicle, if they're wanting to know what public charging stations are around them. And then there is money from utilities that they're going to be spending on charging infrastructure, particularly in Massachusetts. Eversource and Massachusetts have committed to putting a significant amount of money towards electric vehicle charging infrastructure. I don't remember the specific amounts, but it is more than the Build Back Better bill is going to allow for Massachusetts. So in conjunction with the money from Build Back Better, which passed earlier this year, and the utilities providing money for charging stations, I do expect in Massachusetts and in even Rhode Island that the charging infrastructure will be built out within the next few years to make it even better for folks. And then charging really isn't that difficult, and so I just want to explain the basics of charging. So there are 3 levels of charging: level 1, level 2, and DC fast charging, which is also called level 3. And so you'll see, actually, hold on, let me go back. So for level 1, that's a 110 volt outlet, and that'll provide 2 to 6 miles of range per hour. So that's like your regular wall outlet that you plug your phone into. It's not the best rate of charge, but honestly, there's lots of EV owners that I know that use this method and it works well enough for them. Then there's level 2, which is a 220 volt outlet, and it can provide anywhere from 11 to 25 miles of range per hour. Now, this is something that you can find when you're out on the go to charge at a charging station, and it's also something that you can have installed in your home. So it's a similar outlet to like a washer dryer or a stove in voltage, and electricians really, they know how to install this type of outlet. And it usually will cost you with the work from the electrician and with the unit itself, it should cost you no more than around $1,000 if there's no outstanding issues. And the last one is DC fast charging. And so we put 90 miles in 30 minutes or faster here as like a placeholder because DC fast charging units can range in like voltage. And so it could charge your car even faster. So one DC fast charging station could have one set amount of voltages, and then another could have something that's a little bit higher. So that might charge a little bit higher. Or a little bit faster than the previous one. So just know that it'll vary a little bit, but they do generally charge your cars very, very quickly. For the different levels of charging, there are different plug types. Level 1 and level 2 generally have the same plug type, so it's the J1772, which you'll see on the top right-hand corner. DC fast charging, there are 2 different plug types. There's the J1772 combo, which can also be known as CCS, and then there's the CHAdeMO. The difference is most American and European cars use the J1772 combo, and traditionally a lot of Asian manufactured cars use the CHAdeMO outlets. However, I think that the Asian manufacturers have seen how the American and European markets have been performing and how they've been going, and so they're actually making waves to move their new models towards the J1772 combo. A good example of that is Nissan. So Nissan still has the Leaf, which charges DC fast charges with CHAdeMO, and their upcoming Nissan Ariya, which is supposed to be delivered to its first customers in late summer, early fall, is actually going to be J1772 combo fast charging. So we're really excited about that. I won't really talk too much about Tesla because it does have its own proprietary port, but because it's its own separate thing, I just want to cover the general basics. One last thing before we move on from this slide is that, oh, sorry, there is a big gust of wind over here. So not all cars come equipped with DC fast charging capabilities. Plug-in hybrids, for example, generally don't have DC fast charging capabilities because there's no need, because you have that gas backup. But the battery electric vehicles don't always come equipped with DC fast charging. If that is something that you want in your car, you need to make sure that that's the car you buy. So it's not something that can be installed after the fact. It has to be put into the car while the car is being manufactured. So just keep an eye out for that. And you can charge on the go. So here are two maps that we pulled from PlugShare, which is one of the main apps we recommend to folks. It shows the charging infrastructure available in Western Massachusetts and Eastern Massachusetts. The green are level 2 charging stations, and the orange are DC fast charging stations. What's great about PlugShare is that it's crowdsourced, so it'll tell you things like what the state of the charging station is. Is it ever broken? Are there usually long lines? Does it cost anything to use? Is it in like a well-lit place? That sort of thing. Another app I would suggest is ChargePoint, because a lot of charging stations here are networked with ChargePoint. And then the third app I would recommend is a Better Route Planner, because it is really great for long distance driving, and that's what a lot of my EV ambassadors who are our EV owner volunteers recommend when they go on road trips. That's what they use. And another slide with pictures of southeastern Massachusetts and the Cape and what infrastructure looks like in Rhode Island. So we get a lot of questions about living in an apartment complex or in a condo, and how can you convince your property manager or owner to install charging stations at your home. And so one of my wonderful colleagues, she made this guide that helps show all the great points about installing these charging stations and how it could benefit the property manager or the owner. And so if that is your situation, I definitely recommend you check it out. It is also on our website. Okay, and now we're at purchase and lease incentives. So the first thing I'll talk about is the federal tax credit. The federal tax credit is up to $7,500, but that depends on the battery size of the vehicle and your personal tax liability. So for battery size, your typical plug-in hybrid will not qualify for the full $7,500. The Toyota Prius Prime, for example, only gets about 25-26 miles of range, electric range, and so that car only qualifies for about $4,500. And then your Hyundai Kona, which gets around 259 miles of range, I believe, is able to have the full $7,500 tax credit. That being said, it also depends upon your personal tax liability. So if you don't have that tax liability, the government's not going to cut you a check for any money, which is unfortunate. It does expire, so manufacturers right now only have 200,000 units to sell before the federal tax credit starts to phase out for them. So Chevy and Tesla met this quota quite a while ago, and so there's no federal tax credit for them. From what I'm hearing, Toyota is on the precipice of reaching that mark, that 200,000 unit mark. So if you're interested in a Prius Prime or a Toyota RAV4 Prime, and this is something that could help you out, now would be the time to get one of those vehicles. Another thing to note here is that this is for purchase. If you lease a car, most dealers will roll the federal tax credit into the price of the lease, but not all. It is dependent upon the dealer that you go to. And so that might be something to consider if you're trying to figure out whether you want to purchase or lease. And then there are state rebates to consider. So Massachusetts has the state More EV rebate. That's $2,500 rebate for a battery electric vehicle and a $1,500 rebate for a plug-in hybrid. And so those do come with some caveats. So for the plug-in hybrid, it has to have 25 miles of range or more. And then for any of these vehicles, it has to be below $50,000 in purchase price. For the More EV rebate, you also need to sign up for this on their website. So you need to do that within 3 months of purchase or lease of the vehicle. What's not on here is it was newly announced that Rhode Island could potentially be having a rebate that could go into effect as early as this summer. This is currently in a period of open comment, so we're waiting to see what's really going to happen, but it could be great news for Rhode Islanders who have been missing out on a state rebate. Previously, like I said, we used to have drive green discounts. Unfortunately, for the most part, that's not the case right now due to lack of inventory. But we can introduce you to dealerships and potentially get you on the right track to pre-order. Okay, I'm going to stop here to see if there's any questions, and then I could potentially show you what the website looks like. Oh, here we go. Someone asked that they heard that Massachusetts is considering upping their rebates, and is this so? It is definitely potential. I know that the Massachusetts rebate as it stands now is set to end, I think, either beginning of June or the end of June. But this has happened before and it's always been reinstated. So stay tuned on that. And then I have a question that says, do you have any information on mobile chargers? I think you might be referring to like ones that you keep in your trunk, like a battery pack. I think. And the answer is I've heard a little bit about them, but I haven't looked too much into them because they don't seem like a good idea, because why you don't want your trunk filled with mobile batteries in your car. You kind of would rather just charge at a charging station would be my preference anyways. I hope that answered your question. Someone asked, should I wait to buy an EV given supply issues? Honestly, it depends what your situation is. So I think I would probably wait for a while just to see what the inventory levels are like, because even used cars are really expensive right now, and in some cases used cars are more expensive than brand new cars. And we've gotten a lot of feedback that dealers are charging a lot higher over the MSRP than they usually would. So if you can find yourself a steal, a good deal, then I would definitely do it. But it would take some legwork and a lot of work. Someone's asking, I live in a condominium building. The condominium association is considering an EV station. Condominium association does not pay taxes. Are there any other rebates or such for condominium associations? What I would say to you is look into your local utility and see if they have any programs to incentivize people to install charging stations. Because generally speaking, I know that National Grid and Eversource have done those things in the past. I'm just not sure if they're doing that right now. Okay. Any other questions from anybody? Okay, let me just get the website up so I can show you what that looks like, and then I'll go back to answer any more questions that pop up. Okay, So now we are on the Drive Green website. So it's greenenergyconsumers.org/drivegreen. You'll come to this main page and you'll see there's 3 green buttons. The first one is learn more, the second find new or used, and then the third is get involved. So I'll just quickly bring you through them to show you what it looks like. So learn more is kind of what the title is about. It's just as a way for you to get acclimated to electric vehicles, and answer any questions you may have, to sign up for our newsletter potentially. And so we go over things like, basic EV 101 things that we're doing right now, charging and driving, why it's great for the environment and health, cost and rebates, and so on and so forth. So the idea is once you have learned all you want to know or think you need to know, you're done here, you would then go to find new or used, which brings you to our electric car shopping tool. We'll just start with used quickly. Okay. So the used tool is a little bit different than the new tool in that we don't connect you with dealers, but we do show you what to expect for certain cars, and particularly with certain range, year ranges of cars that are similar. So for the BMW, for example, the i3 from 2014 and 2017 was very similar for those 3 years. And so generally speaking, we have what you should expect to pay for the lowest price and what you should expect to pay for the highest price, and some just basic things about them, like the style of the car and the electric range. You'll see we separated it out because in 2019 to 2020, that range went all the way to 126 miles per charge. And so because of that, there's different things to expect and also different prices associated with that. On the left-hand side, you can see you can filter by pretty much anything you can think of. So if you want a battery electric vehicle versus a plug-in hybrid, the style of the car, the range, and so on and so forth. And I'm just going to switch over to the new. So with the new, we provide you with pre-orders, and eventually we're going to try to get you back to providing you with discounts. We are actually offering a discount on one vehicle right now, which is a Chevy Bolt through Quirk Chevy at the moment, because the Bolt EUV, because they finally have vehicles that are off the Chevy stop sale. So we're really excited about that. So on the left-hand side, you'll see we have the same things to filter by, but we've also added in price and things like that. On this part of the form, every car has its own particular card where we talk about the fast facts that you would want to know about any vehicle at a glance. We just added things like level 2 charging and DC fast charging. So you'll see the rate that it would need to charge to get that maximum speed of charge. So the Nissan Ariya is capable of charging at a rate of 130 kilowatts. So that's very, very fast, which means it could charge your car, and I think it's something like 18 to 20 minutes from 10 to 80%. And then we also have the base MSRP, the federal tax credit that's available for the vehicle if it is. And I think I chose Massachusetts, so it shows you the Massachusetts state rebate and what that could mean after all the incentives. So what you would do here is you decide you want the Ariya and you like the Ioniq. So you click those 2 things. You click the next page, and then it brings you to the select your trims page. So you would choose whatever trim level you like. We're going to go for the basic stuff. And then it also brings you then to this page, and you decide which dealership that you want to go to. It could be that you're closer to Milford or you're closer to Salem, New Hampshire. So in this case, we're going to choose Milford. And what happens here is that it's an exchange of information. So once you fill this out, an email gets sent to the dealership with all of your information, and then you in turn get an email with all of their information. So you can kick the process off right away if you so choose. And that's really it. If there is a discount, this ensures that we can fight for you and make sure you get that discount if there's ever any question at the dealership. But other than that, it's a fairly simple and straightforward process, or at least we like to think so. And then I'm just going to go and show you one last thing on the website, and then I'll return to questions. So the last thing I would encourage you to check out is the Get Involved button. Particularly taking the pledge. So we realize that not everybody has the ability to buy a car right now, but is looking in the future. It is a big financial decision. So you can take the pledge that your next car will be electric, and we'll keep you in the loop of all need to know EV developments. Similarly, you can subscribe to our newsletter for the same thing. It's a quarterly newsletter, so it keeps you up to date with what's happening with the program, but also what's happening in the EV world at large. You can sign up to join us at an event. We have our events calendar listed there. You could become an EV ambassador, and so that's an EV owner who wants to come to events either online or in person. And then I would also encourage you to check out the Drive Green community group on Facebook. I think we've got about 260 members on the group, and it's a place where people who are just dipping their toes into the EV waters can go and ask questions and share stories, or it's somewhere, it could also be someone who knows a lot about EVs and is just looking to share expertise and, a place to nerd out about electric vehicles. Okay. 1 second. Let me just switch back to the presentation really quickly. Okay. And so that's really it. And now we have plenty of time for questions if you have any. So let me just pull that box out and I'll see what we have. So what happens during a power outage for electric vehicles? Well, it's great in that you can still, if you still have charge, you can still use it. It is unfortunate that you might not be able to charge your car, but some cars are coming out with this thing called bi-directional charging. So you might have a case where you can charge your home or power your home with what's left of your EV battery. So instead of a gas generator, you can potentially charge your car. But I would hope that if there's an electric outage, you might be able to find a public charging station that's not too far off where you can charge your vehicle. Any other questions? Another question is, do EV batteries lose charge over time if not recharged? So generally speaking, no. And if you are going away for weeks on end, it's recommended that you keep your car charged anywhere from 60 to 80%. That's just because it's the optimal amount of charge to have, and your car should be fine. Any other questions? Someone is asking what the rebate amount is from us. We don't offer rebates. We make sure you have all the information about the rebates that are available. We are a small nonprofit, so we put you in the direction of what the state rebates are and if there's any federal incentives. And like I said, the Drive Green program generally was a discount program, but that was based on what the dealers had to offer on an individual monthly basis. And now they don't have discounts to offer, usually because they don't have inventory on the lots. Someone asked, any chance that the 50K ceiling might be removed in Massachusetts for electric vehicle, for the more EV rebate? I think no. I think that they're capping it at that point because the idea is to make it more affordable for people who wouldn't potentially buy a car, and $50,000 is already quite a large amount for a car. Does AAA offer mobile charging if you lose charge on the side of the road, or would you need to get towed? Actually, one of my colleagues is on the line here, and Adriana, if you are still listening and want to unmute yourself, she is doing a blog on roadside assistance and has been in talks with AAA.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Devin?
Yes.
Okay. So if you lose charge in the middle of the road, AAA is able to come and tow you. It's no problem. They are working on getting each truck to have like a battery, but right now they don't have enough. But yeah, either way, they can always usually just charge you to your house or to the closest charging station. It's up to you, but there's no problem if you stop. Also, they don't normally run into that problem. When I talked to the manager of like the whole regional area, he said that they've only really ever picked, I think it's like less than 1% of all of their roadside assistance. So that's it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Hello everybody, my name is Brian Stewart. I'm a co-founder of Electrify Now. Today we're going to be talking about the benefits of electrification and how all of us can take part in helping to accelerate the transition of our energy systems to clean renewables for a sustainable future. I'd like to start really high level because most people don't really have a very good idea about where carbon emissions come from, even though they sort of understand that man-made carbon emissions are overheating the earth. Where do these emissions come from? And if we don't know where they come from, it's hard to know what all of us can do about reducing them. So let's start with global carbon emissions. This is a picture for the United States, but most countries are similar. All industrialized nations are very similar, and agricultural nations are only slightly different. The truth is that over 80% of our carbon emissions come from burning fossil fuels for energy, specifically for electricity, for transportation, and for heat. Of course, some come from agriculture, and in some nations that might be slightly higher than here in the United States, but in general, agriculture and other industrial processes are less than 20% of the total carbon emissions that man makes every year and contributes to global warming. The same picture holds true at the household level. For most of us, about 60% of the emissions that we're responsible for come from the energy we purchase. Think of it as your electricity bill, the gasoline you buy to put in your car, the natural gas you use to heat your home. 60% comes from those sources. Of course, there's energy associated with the stuff we buy and the food we eat. And if we really, really work hard at trying to reduce our emissions from those two places, we can buy less often, buy fewer things, try to buy our food locally, buy organics and regeneratively grown agricultural products. That will reduce these two boxes on the right somewhat. But this 60%, the big blue box, it's entirely possible for all of us to make that go to zero. We have done that in our home. We've helped hundreds of people across the United States do the same. It's part of the electrification movement, and we have information on our website to help you to figure out how to do that. The reason why energy is such a problem is that as we burn coal and natural gas for electricity, we use gasoline and diesel to fuel our cars and trucks, which are the major sources of transportation carbon emissions. And we heat our homes and buildings, and some of our industrial processes like making steel, etc., use natural gas and to some degree propane. I want to spend a little extra focus on natural gas because there's so much misinformation about it. The truth is that natural gas is similar, and some people say worse than coal in terms of its complete carbon impact and life cycle climate impacts because of the leakage that happens throughout the system. It's a major source of air pollution. Somehow natural gas doesn't get associated with air pollution the way automobiles do, but it's a major source of ozone and smog in our cities today. And renewable natural gas, although it's getting a lot of hype from the gas industry, is not a solution that's going to save the day. The reason is because there's nowhere near enough sources of this so-called renewable natural gas to ever come close to meeting our needs. The most conservative or most optimistic forecast is that there's enough for 15% of our typical current gas usage, and there's no more sources available. These are sources such as municipal waste dumps, CAFO feedlots, etc. And it's 2 to 5 times more expensive than fossil gas. So the idea that we're going to heat our homes with renewable natural gas is nothing more than a greenwashing marketing ploy from the gas industry that all of us should be very skeptical about. So the bad news is that we have to stop burning fossil fuels. The amazingly optimistic part of this story, though, is that wind and solar are now the lowest sources of new energy generation. This is because the prices of solar panels and wind turbines have been plummeting over the last 2 decades. And now you see that they are the cheapest way to make new energy. And forecasts are that prices will continue to drop on these technologies, while, as you already are seeing, there's upward pressure on the costs of gas and other forms of fossil fuel, partly because of carbon emissions policy, but also just because of the limited availability of those materials. So this is fantastic news. The other good news is that battery storage, which is another really critical component to a clean energy future, the prices there are plummeting along similar price curves and are projected to fall even further, which is why automobile manufacturers estimate that it will be the same cost to manufacture an EV as a gas-burning car within a few years. This is also an essential technology for renewable energy for our electric grid because storage will be a critical component. When you couple that with this other piece of good news, that electric appliances are become dramatically more energy efficient over the last few decades, there's even more reason to be excited about electrification. The LED light bulb is the poster child for this. It uses 10 times less energy than the incandescent light bulb. But this is true of everything that we have in our homes and in the world that uses electricity, our refrigerators, our computers. Everything is sipping electricity now that was guzzling it just years ago. And then on top of that, the electric grid, for reasons that we just discussed, is getting cleaner literally every day as more renewables are used to replace coal and gas fired generation. So when you couple all of these things together, low cost renewables, high efficiency electric appliances, a cleaner grid all the time, it's impossible to ignore the inevitable outcome that we should be thinking of electrifying everything. And this is a concept that you will hear these words more and more, and it is referring to a future where the wind and the sun power all of our primary energy needs. We use it for generating electricity. We then use that electricity for transportation, for our cars and trucks, and we use that to heat our homes and buildings and for industrial processes. This comes with amazing side benefits. Cleaner air. Where does air pollution come from? For the most part, it comes from burning fossil fuels. We'll get more available and cleaner water. No using it for fracking. No using it for firing coal-powered and gas-powered electric plants, which takes unbelievable amounts of water. Fossil fuels industry is a huge consumer of water. We'll get better jobs. We'll have a stronger economy. Every piece of research on the green energy revolution shows that it leads to a stronger economy with better jobs, higher paying jobs, safer jobs, and a more resilient economy. We'll have also equal access to energy. We see how important this is with what's going on with Ukraine right now, where you see how one country that has an abundance of fossil fuels at its disposal can wreak havoc with its neighbors by using that money to fuel aggression and leverage control over their neighbors. So that's all amazing good news, but we can't ignore the stark reality that every single device that burns fossil fuels must be replaced with clean energy alternative before 2050. Think of every device across the whole planet. This is a little bit daunting because obviously there's thousands of coal and gas power plants. There's literally millions or even tens or hundreds of millions of cars and trucks that need to be replaced. There's millions of gas furnaces and water heaters and boilers in our homes, in our buildings, and in industry. All these things will need to be retired in the 30 years we have before 2050, where we need to get to net zero emissions to create a planet that will be inhabitable. This can be daunting, but on the other hand, in that span of time, all these devices that are currently in operation will be retired because they will either break, their end of service will come due, and it will be an opportunity to replace those things with clean energy alternatives. But we cannot afford to miss any opportunity we have to replace something that naturally retires that burns fossil fuels with a clean energy alternative. We have amazingly potent solutions that are right here today. They're ready to scale, they're cost effective, and they eliminate carbon, not just reduce it. Wind and solar, which we talked about. Every time a gas plant needs to be retired, we need to replace it with wind and solar. Electric vehicles to replace all our gas burning ones. And that's true whether as a homeowner you're looking at a new car for yourself or for delivery vans, interstate trucking. Electric vehicles massively outperform gas-powered vehicles in every way, and when charged with renewable energy, produce zero emissions. And we can use electric heat pumps to heat our homes and cool our homes also, and our commercial buildings and our factories. These devices are here, they're incredibly effective. The problem is that they are not near at the scale they need to be. Wind and solar is only 12% of current energy generation. Electric vehicles are less than 1% of the cars on the road. Electric heat pumps are about 10% of the heating solutions here in the United States. This is why all of us can help to accelerate adoption of these new technologies that have been proven. They're not really new. They've been here for decades, but they are ready to scale now. And by us adopting them, we can accelerate them to scale and make them the new normal and help solve the climate problem. This is because renewable energy and electrification, when combined, are step change reductions in emissions, not just gradual reductions. They eliminate emissions when they're used in conjunction. The easiest way to understand this is in our own homes. A typical home here in Oregon, and it's not that different across the United States, will produce about 3 to 5 tons of emissions every year just from the electricity that we consume. One car will produce 4 to 8 tons. One gas furnace, about the same. And a gas water heater will produce 1 to 3 tons every year just from the fuel that it uses to produce the water we need. If we do the very best we can to conserve energy, turn the lights off when we're not using them, eliminate those power strips that sip electricity, get a gas car that gets the highest mileage possible, drive less, drive slower, get a gas furnace that's the most efficient, turn down your thermostat, take cold showers, all of these things. If we are diligent about them, we can reduce the amount of fossil fuels that we consume at most 20%, which is great, but it's nowhere near what we need. We need to get these to zero. And you can see how when we combine renewable energy plus electrification, that becomes possible. Renewable electricity is entirely accessible for everyone in the United States through green power plants, through community solar, through putting solar panels on our roof. Some of these things will save you money in addition to getting 100% carbon-free electricity. Then use that electricity to charge your EV. And instead of 4 to 8 tons per year, you're producing zero emissions. Use that renewable electricity to power your heat pump and eliminate the gas furnace and reduce your emissions by another 4 to 8 tons. Eliminate gas-powered water heaters and replace them with heat pumps, another 1 to 3 tons that goes to zero. So you can see how when you combine these things in a home that typically would produce 20 to 30 tons of carbon emissions every year will go to zero when you combine renewable energy and electrification. And that same house will save money on utility bills by about $1,000 per year because a typical home spends nearly $4,000, in some cases more than that, if you have 2 cars, just for the energy that you consume, and that will go down to more like $3,000 with these steps that we just articulated on the slide before. This is why it's so easy to get excited about renewable energy and electrification. We will have homes that are safer and more comfortable, and buildings, commercial buildings, the same. And we'll be using our energy dollars on the solution rather than continuing to use our $4,000 a year, our energy spending, to fund climate change. At Electrify Now, we try to make this really simple so people can take these actions. We talk about in forms of 4 steps. Clean up your electric supply. Make sure you have clean energy coming into your home. We can show you how to do that. Go to our website, electrifynow.net, to find out how to do that. Electrify your home. Get rid of anything you have in your home that burns fossil fuels, but especially your furnace and your water heater, your stove and your gas fireplace insert, for sure. All your lawn tools that burn gas, get rid of all that stuff. Replace it with electric alternatives that work better, require less maintenance, are cleaner and safer to use. Electrify your ride. Get rid of your gas car when it's time and replace it with an EV or an electric motorcycle or an electric bike. And then we need to remember that there are many people who will struggle to make this transition. There are capital costs that are required for these things. Some of us are well able to do that. Others will really struggle. So we need policy and philanthropy to bring everyone along in this journey, not just those who can most readily afford it.
Okay, so now you've gotten to meet us a little bit. Before we go into breakout groups, I'm going to have Mal just give her call to action for those Rhode Islanders on the call.
Thanks, Devin. So for folks that have been familiar with green energy consumers for a long time, you know that we do education work to help people learn about the benefits of electric vehicles, but that there are lots of key policies in both Massachusetts and Rhode Island that need to be enacted in order to continue to help address some of the largest barriers that people face when they're considering an electric vehicle. So very often we hear people talk about how there's not enough charging infrastructure to support them in the transition to an electric vehicle, and that they're concerned because the upfront costs make driving an EV unaffordable to them. And so we see a really clear need for policy to be able to fill in those gaps so that we can advance EV adoption, make EVs accessible to everyone, and make sure that electric vehicles can be a tool to help both states meet their climate goals, which are binding and mandatory and absolutely need to happen for us to avoid the worst of the climate crisis. So on the advocacy side, in Massachusetts, about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, there was a big Senate bill that established a lot of key planning principles to help Massachusetts do its planning for electric vehicle adoption. And we're happy to report that in Rhode Island, we have a very similar bill being heard today in the House Finance Committee called the Electric Transportation Act. This bill would be a very useful, critical tool for Rhode Island to continue to support people to make the switch to an electric vehicle. So it establishes a lot of the planning that Rhode Island needs to do in order to help people access charging, be able to afford EVs. It helps get our electrical grid ready to make sure that we can support all the EVs that are coming, and establishes key to-dos across the state to make sure that we're electrifying vehicles in the state fleet as well. So it's an important bill that I think has an impact on you, whether you're already driving an EV and want to see more charging infrastructure, or if you're thinking about it and need supportive policy to help get you there. So in just a moment, I'm going to drop a little set of instructions in the chat for how you can submit testimony to the House Finance Committee to make sure that this bill moves forward. And this is an action alert only for Rhode Islanders. So Massachusetts folks, sorry about that, but don't worry. If you want to get engaged on policy, you'll have ample opportunities to do so in the coming weeks. So follow our blog to stay updated on that if you're interested. But I'm just going to drop this into the chat. And now I will open breakout rooms. So you should see a little box pop up that indicates
All right, I think we're all here already. Okay. All right, well, thanks for joining everybody. I'm just gonna have us all go around and introduce ourselves, at least the EV owners who volunteered for the panel, and then we can go ahead and ask questions. Peter, you're the first one on my screen. Do you wanna go first?
All right. Excuse me, I'm Peter Van Brown. I've had an electric vehicle of one sort or another for 7 years, and the first one was a Ford Focus EV that had a range of 72 miles. That was exciting. The second one was a Nissan Leaf with a range of 150 miles, which is very exciting to double the range. And now I have a 2021 Nissan Leaf Plus, which does over 200 miles. So I'm not suffering any range anxiety anymore.
Moving up in the world, Peter.
Moving up.
All right, Sasha, you are next.
Hi, yeah, I'm Sasha. I just got my first EV last year, which was the VW ID4 right when it came out. Was sort of looking for something that had a little bit longer range, was a little bit cheaper with a little bit more room, and that sort of ticked all the boxes compared to what was on the market at the time. So happy to talk about it more.
Great. Xavier, why don't you go? And don't think I'm not going to ask you about that road trip later, because I will.
My name is Xavier. I've had a Chevy Bolt, 2019 Chevy Bolt, for almost 3 years now. I leased it through the Drive Green program, so there's a plug right there. And a couple of weeks ago, I recently bought out the lease contract, so now I'm an owner full time. So there you go.
Okay, Amy, do you want to go next?
Hi everyone, I'm Amy. I have a Tesla Model X. I actually bought it used, so that's a little bit different perspective than some other people here. And I've had it for about 2 years now, and I love it.
Okay, Jenna, you're up next.
I'm Gina. I'm on my second Leaf. I got my first one in 2016 and then my second one in 2020. I love the car. I don't think I'll ever drive anything but electric from now on.
Glenn, you're up.
I'm Glenn. I live in Greenfield, Mass. And I've had e-Niro now for 3 years and have about 27,000 miles on it. And it's fantastic.
Okay, and then last but not least, I believe we have Charles.
Well, I live in Williamsburg, Massachusetts, Glenn, and I've owned the Polestar 2 for about 13 months. I bought the launch edition, and I'm quite pleased with its performance and the Volvo Epic and the vegan interior. And I'm still trying to overcome range anxiety. I had a recent incident over the weekend traveling and showed up at an EV Connect fast charger that wouldn't connect. But eventually, after jiggling the plug, I accomplished the handshake and was able to charge.
I like that way of putting it. You accomplished the handshake. Well, those are our panelists today. So if anyone wants to jump in with a question, now is the time.
I would like to know, do you have an update on whether the tax credit for the EVSE equipment has been extended?
It hasn't at this time, to my knowledge. It expired at the end of December of last year, and we're waiting to hear back. Xavier, I'm going to put you on the spot. What road trip did you take in the middle of like a snowy spring Colorado day?
So for work, I had to take a trip out to Telluride. So I live in Fort Collins now. It's like central northern Colorado, but Telluride is like all the way southwestern. So it's out near like the corner of like New Mexico, Utah, and Arizona. And so it's like a 7-hour drive. And it was like nice balmy spring day out here, but then up there, once you get at elevation, it was like full like winter conditions out there. It actually like snowed like a foot of snow second day I was there. But yeah, so it was like 420 miles or so. Took me, on Google Maps, it says that it was like a 7-hour drive, but probably took me around like 10 hours in total when accounting for charging and such. So, yeah.
But there's plenty of charging out there.
Yeah, so there's one major highway that takes you from like Denver to Moab. It's called I-70, and that highway is just like littered with EV charging stations. A lot of them at like Walmarts and like gas stations, convenience stores, stuff like that. I use mostly Electrify Americas and charge points along the way.
John, you have a question?
I do. I was curious about buying out the lease of the Bolt. Was it a lot of people who bought cars 3 or 4 years ago because of the 30 or so % price increase in used cars found out it was a real deal to buy their 3-year-old any kind of car at this point? How was it with the Bolt? Did the math make a lot of sense to buy it? And did you buy it for well below what retail price would be?
So the price that I bought it at was already negotiated at the beginning of the lease contract.
Right.
So the lease contract, like, you know, from the start, it tells you how much it would be if you were to buy out the lease afterwards. As far as like how much is it compared to like the MSRP on like a used 2019 Chevy Bolt? Not entirely sure. Definitely, it's not like astronomical. I was able to like get the pricing down so that like I paid the same. Right now, I'm paying the same amount that I was paying under the lease contract. So like from budgeting perspective, it's all the same for me.
Yeah.
The reason why I went with that decision is like for me personally, I still hadn't even come close to like what the actual miles were on the contract. So I did like 10,000 a year for 3 years. And I still wasn't close to 30,000. It was going to expire in June of this year. And I'm at like 25,000 right now. So there's still some value left in the contract. And along with that, like for me, I'm not really seeing, you know, like a full like step above, like as far as like upgrades go, like I'm not seeing that a step change in like the value of getting a new car at this point.
Yep.
Like as far as like the range on like the EUVs or the Chevy Bolt EVs, it's like pretty much the same as what mine is.
Yeah.
There's a few features that I'm kind of looking out for as far as like that would be nice on like the next car that I have that still aren't present. One being like the charging rate that I can charge my Chevy Bolt at is like 50 kW. That's like, you know, that's good, but it's not like as good as like some other cars. And I think, and that's the same case as like the new Chevy Bolts. So I'd like to see that improve as well as like the ability to have bidirectional charging. That's another thing that I'm looking forward to in the future as far as features go on new EVs. So yeah, so all in all, like the alternatives for me like weren't that much better than what I have now.
Yeah.
So kind of made
No,
sense
it's
the car that
I was
got.
talking to somebody on Saturday that had a Camry hybrid, and it was a 2019. It was pre-negotiated. They could buy it for $16,900, but the typical price of a Camry hybrid, kind of if you were going to buy one at a used car lot, it's like $25,000. So it was really a no-brainer to buy the car because they could either buy it and enjoy the big savings or buy it and sell it and make a profit. So I was curious if the same thing was with the Bolt.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Does anybody have questions about the charging information that Xavier mentioned, like the rate of charging? You do, Laura? Okay.
I didn't understand what is bidirectional. Yeah.
Yeah, so we can start at like the levels of charging and then maybe switch to bidirectional and particularly talk about the rate at the DC fast charging that Xavier mentioned. But I don't want to take up all of the talking. So if anybody else wants to explain level 1, level 2, or level 3.
You want me to?
I mean, I was going to pick you, Peter, so that
This is ESP working here, Devon. Well, level 1 is just your normal 120 volt outlet, and it's typically very slow. I used to charge my Ford Focus using that for a year, and it charges maybe at a rate of 8 or 10 miles of distance an hour. Level 2 is 240 volt, so it's like plugging into a dryer outlet, and the charger I have actually does plug into a dryer outlet that I had installed in my garage. That charges at a rate of about 25 miles of range per hour. So it's good for overnight charging. It was also good with the Ford Focus because when I got the 240 volt or level 2, it would preheat the car, which when you only have a range of 72 miles is a good thing. You don't want to heat your car using the battery because it takes away from the range. So that was an incentive. And excuse me, level 3 is DC charging, and that can, I think the minimum now, as Xavier was saying, the Chevy Bolt was an early EV. You can charge at a rate of 50 kilowatts an hour. 50 kilowatts, not an hour, 50 at a rate of 50 kilowatts. There are chargers now in Europe that will charge at rates of 350. They're probably the most new ones. So you can figure out, I think, with the Hyundai Ioniq 5, it has a very fast charging rate. You could go from about 10% to 80% of your battery in about 20 minutes. That's probably one of the fastest charging EVs at the moment. And 80% is often mentioned because all EV batteries, once you get to 80%, really slow down. So it can take you as long to get from 10% to 80% as it would take you to get from 80% to 100%. They just slow down. It's the nature of the battery. They're the three types. Did I cover that okay, Devin?
Perfect. The only thing I would make sure to mention is that, Laura, you can do level 1 and level 2 at home. Level 2 you can also find on the go. And then DC fast charging is only in public spaces because it's too much of a power suck. Go ahead.
I actually have a Toyota Prius plug-in hybrid that I've had since 2012. And I just have, a regular 110 outlet here. But like my next car is going to be one of, one that has better range and is all EV. But I had heard that you shouldn't do fast charging all the time on your battery because it's not good for your battery. Does that just mean the third option? Like, is the 220 dryer vent plug still okay to, like, if you were charging at home all the time?
Yeah, that's just in relation to DC fast charging.
Yeah, I charged my second Leaf every day because it didn't have much of a range. And after 3 years, the battery condition was still at a 1. It hadn't degraded at all. But I watch a number of YouTube channels, and in Europe, they use Nissan Leafs as taxis. So they had a Nissan Leaf come in because the battery was defective, and it had been rapid charged 2 or 3 times a day, and it had damaged some of the cells. It had 120,000 miles on it. But they were able to take the battery out, replace the defective modules, and put it back again. So, with a Leaf, certainly, they've been around in Europe long enough that the batteries can actually be repaired. They don't have to be junked.
And does anybody want to explain bidirectional charging, or does anyone have their eye on a vehicle that has that capability?
Well, strangely enough, Devin, I already have a vehicle with that capability.
Peter, I knew I knew it was just fate to call on you.
Well, Chatamo will do that. It's the out-of-date charging system that is popular in Japan, but it has built-in bidirectional, which means you could use your Nissan Leaf as a generator if, and this is a big if you can find the interface box, because nobody makes an interface box for the American electricity system. It's what I call 120 volt, I've forgotten this, two-phase system. You can get them for 240 volts, and most of the world runs on 240 single phase. And you can get a box that would allow your leaf to work, but you can't find one for the US, Caribbean, I think called split phase system, they call it. So nobody makes that box. There's just not the demand for that. But the new Ford F-150, which they will sell you the box with the car, and that will do it. That will power your house. So that, if you know, it uses the same box, I guess, to charge. And then if you get a power outage, your massive battery in your truck will keep your house going for probably a number of days.
And Laura, there's a lot of different cars that are going to be coming out soon that have that capability. I think the Ioniq 5 might even have it, if I'm remembering correctly, but I would have to double check. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely check it out.
And I would just add too, because, you know, my job is all about the intersection of like the technology and the policy that we need at the state level to make sure that we're actually able to use all of these cool new toys, for lack of a better word, that are coming out. You know, you don't just need a car that is able to charge bidirectionally, but there's also some upgrades that need to be done, like within our electricity system as a whole, so that power can move both ways. Massachusetts and Rhode Island happen to be like really behind the curve on this, because we don't even have smart meters in most people's homes, and those are very common across the country. And so there's really no like monitoring of what's going on in the electricity system. And so overall, we need just a much smarter 21st century system to be able to allow electric cars to like push power back onto the grid. But the first step is essentially we need to be able to power people's homes or power appliances. And so that piece of the technology is coming, and more we're going to need to be able to prepare for other elements to get that be ready. So yeah, might still be a few years out in terms of like when you might actually be able to power your home with your car. But I would say at least, you know, by 2030, it's going to be really common, and it's going to be more and more common as a feature that's built into the cars that come out.
Right. All right. So I'm going to go to Glenn, and then I'm going to look at some questions in the chat.
I was going to answer one of the questions in the chat about whether or not you need a home charger. In the town where I live, there's municipal charging parking lots that are free in level 2. And so we use those a lot. We also have a 50 kilowatt DC fast charger nearby where we like to walk the dogs. And the price there is 23 cents a kilowatt, which is the same price that I pay at home. So we often just plug in there while we're walking the dogs. But I did move my dryer outlet, since we don't have an electric dryer. I moved it to the outside in a waterproof box, and then I can plug in my own level 2 charger into that. But I've never used it except for when I first put the plug in, just to test to see if it worked. And last year, Eversource came and installed a little meter to measure my charging on my home charger system. And it's been about 6 months, and I have not plugged the car in once. They gave me a $100 gift card, Visa, gift card for participating in their survey. But unfortunately, I'm skewing the results because I have never plugged in my car since they put that little meter in to measure it. And apparently they're going to come back once a year and monitor how much I've used it. So I feel like I need to plug in sometime, but it's just an easy walk to the parking lots where we can charge for free. And one of them is the county jail, which has over 1,000 solar panels on the parking lot. And that makes me feel pretty good about plugging in there. And it's still free. It's free to charge. And I leave my car overnight because it's probably the safest place to park your car in the city. So anyway, so that's my experience with home charging. I have that capacity, but I have just never had to use it. I thought I might in the wintertime if I couldn't drive, but even then didn't need it.
Great. Amy, I'm going to call on you. I remember recently you saying that how much it cost to fill up your Tesla with electrons. Basically, how much did it cost you?
Yeah, so I do it at home mostly. I have a charger at my home, and I honestly didn't really notice much of a difference in my energy bill, which was nice because I was a little bit worried about it at first. And then when I do fast charging, so I have a Tesla, so I'll go to the superchargers. It costs me normally under $15 for like a full tank to charge up my car. So especially comparing to gas nowadays, it's way, 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 way cheaper.
And Sasha, how about you? You're a new EV owner. How has it been for you? Do you get a lot of your chargers for free? Do you charge at home? How has it been?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I actually live in an apartment or at least a multi-unit building with 3 units. So I don't have like a garage, and even where I park the car, there's an off-street spot, but it's not right next to the building. So I can't be charging all the time when I'm at home. So that was a major consideration in even being able to get any EV for me. So I briefly considered the scenario of like, okay, would I just use public chargers and figure it out? And I think it really depends, right? If you have one sort of next door, that's probably a no-brainer, but that's not the case everywhere. And in my case, I think the closest to Electrify America is like 15-minute drive or 10-15-minute drive, which is fine, but it gets hard because then you have to go there, right? And either you're waiting for, whatever, half an hour if you're really filling a full battery. So I think on balance, it was a kind of being able to get a 240-volt outlet installed where I can charge occasionally overnight, just by pulling up to the building and having it be fast enough that an overnight charge, fills half the battery. That was basically like a make it or break it thing for being able to get the EV. So my landlord was kind enough to install that, but that's another big reason why we need more infrastructure for apartment dwellers.
Xavier, now you're dying. Go ahead.
What's it called? Just want to remark that it can be done. Living in an apartment with no ability to charge, like, or have your own personal charger and have to rely on public charging. It can be done. I did it for 2 years in Northampton, Massachusetts, where like the key is to like kind of have a lot of like third places where you are able to like charge while you park. So for example, like I had the gym that I went to, like next door, there was like a bank that had a level 2. So every time that I went to the gym, when I would park, I would charge. And from there, like you're able to like cover like your basic commute to work. Like I was driving like 20 miles daily to work. So yeah, just having like kind of like the charging like built into the routine rather than like having to rely on like overnight is like the way to accomplish doing that.
It's a great workout motivator, by the way. That's the best I've heard. That's awesome.
Yeah. I think Ross, where did you go? You had your hand raised. Oh. Now he's moved on my screen. Okay, we will come back. Oh, Laura, you go ahead.
So my battery's so little, so I always just charge at home, but I want to understand, like, how does ChargePoint work, and some of the other apps, do they all have a fee? Are some of them free? And how do you, do they tell you if the charger is available, or you just have to go there and hope nobody's using it?
Who wants to take a crack at that one? Go ahead, Glenn.
Yeah, ChargePoint I think is really excellent from my experience. There are free chargers. It seems like somebody pays to install them, and then they decide whether or not they want to charge a fee. The ones at the jail here in town, there's 4 level 2 plugs, and they're free. But often the charge point ones do have a fee associated with them, and they have an app that you can use to activate the charger, unlock it essentially. And I have it set up so that it automatically deducts $20 out of my debit card and puts it into kind of a wallet. And then that's what the fee gets taken out of. And you can see on their app, a map that shows whether the units are available or if they're in use. A charge point to me is really the way that the system should work, as compared to a lot of the other ones, which are very clunky or very buggy. And I've never had a problem with the charge point charger not working. Whereas I can't say that for Electrify America at all. It's a good thing that there are often 8 or 10 of those islands at each Walmart or wherever, because a lot of times I have to move to 3 or 4 or 5 of them before I'll get one to actually work. And their customer service is the worst. Absolutely. They don't do customer service. They do customer arguments. And so I try to avoid Electrify America at all costs. Anyway.
Anyone else want to talk about charging to answer Laura?
Well,
Go ahead.
I can talk a little bit about that, and I reluctant to disagree with Glenn, but I like Electrify America. I have the Electrify America app, the ChargePoint app, the EVgo app, the Shell Recharge app, and I have found I've used ChargePoint quite a bit, and I've used Electrify America more because it's usually on the routes that I'm traveling. And in my experience, Electrify America has been consistent. The charging has been great. I can get up to near 150 kilowatts. A couple of times when there have been issues, I call the number, call the customer service number, and they've been very helpful, very cooperative, and even checked back with me after I've filed, after I've spoken to them to see if everything has gone all right. I find it's quite useful to be able to go on one of these apps and say, I want to travel from Massachusetts to Western New York State. I can plan the route. I can see where the charges are. I can check whether the charges are available, whether they're down. Ordinarily, other drivers who have used the chargers will make comments. You can read the comments. And with the Google Maps app in my car, my car will automatically start warming up the battery as I approach the charger, so the battery will be warm when I get there, and I'll be able to charge quicker. So I think every driver's experience is going to be a little different. As I said earlier, this past weekend, my experience with EV Connect was terrible. I finally got the charger to work, but my experience at Electrify America has been very good to me.
Xavier, I know you're chomping at the bit to chime in to answer this question, so why don't you go ahead?
Well, first of all, shout out to Polestar for having that capability, huh? Also, yeah, I noticed a question from John Paul here in the chat talking about PlugShare. Yeah, PlugShare is definitely a great app to use for finding charging stations. The nice thing about it is that it covers all the networks. You can't, in some cases, you can pay for the station through PlugShare. That's kind of like a new feature that they've been adding in, and it's only available for some select charging stations. But for the most part, you have to go onto the individual networks app to pay for the station. However, the nice thing about PlugShare is, like I said, covers all the networks. And if you're planning your route or whatever, and you have 5 stations that are kind of clustered near each other, you can parse through and be okay, hey, this one's rated 8.5 versus this one's a 5. And then you go on you click on that station, and then you look at who's been using it, has it been used in like the past like month or so? Like, has it been which ones are down, like whatever, and you're able to get that visibility on like the you know, how good that station is at that moment in time, if it's like, if it's under maintenance or whatever, without having to go onto every single individual app and looking at those stations. So from a high level perspective, using PlugShare is really nice. And then if you really want, as you're approaching the station, you can double check and look at like the ChargePoint app and see, hey, is this being used right now, you know?
Yeah. I see that there's 2 raised hands. I'm going to get to you in just 1 second. I just want Jenna to comment on what she said in the chat, where you can, I'm sorry, is it Gina or Jenna?
Gina.
Gina, okay, sorry. Can you please comment on what you said in the chat and explain to everybody?
Okay, I've listed my home charger on PlugShare. I don't have it up all the time, like usually in the summer or if I'm going to be around. And I've gotten like texts from people who are saying, you know, I'm driving in from New York. I can't find a charger that works. Can I use yours? And if I'm home, I'll unlock my charger and let them charge up for a few hours. It's a really interesting way to meet people. Yeah, I don't have it up constantly all the time because I don't want like randos just sort of running up on me. But it's kind of a nice way to connect with people and to help people out.
Very cool. Now, just a follow-up question to that. Is it something you can charge for? Is it just like you put your home on there, you're like, okay, you can use it, it's free?
I just put it up. The people who've used it have offered to Venmo me money. And usually I say, just pay it forward. When I'm in New York, I'll get charge up at your house, maybe.
That's very sweet.
But yeah, there are people who offer to pay, but you know, I don't usually need the money. So I just let them do it.
There you go. All right, Ross, you have been very patient with your hand up. Go ahead.
Well, thank you. I was wondering, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. I was wondering, with the threats of international terrorism and cyber terrorism, what are the risks of losing the ability to get a charge if, say, the Russians should shut down our grid? Has anyone thought about that?
Peter, go ahead.
Well, you want me to?
Oh, no, sorry, Peter Haney.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and I'm sorry I'm late, by the way.
No,
so it's a thought. I mean, it's a similar thing as what happens if there's a huge storm and things are down. You know, if there's a big cyber attack, it's not going to affect just people with EVs. It's going to affect everything. It's going to affect you being able to pay at the pump. It's going to be able to affect you buying something at CVS or buying something from Amazon. So it's one of those things that, like, you don't do the what ifs that are going to keep you from moving forward, because we can what if ourselves to death. I get that all the time from people who say, you know, if there's a big storm or something and you don't have power, like, well, I've already charged my car overnight, it's done. But if you all of a sudden realize that you need to get gas and there's no electricity at the gas station, the same applies there, where they can't pump it because there's no electric. So it is something that I've thought about too. But the other thing is, every new car now has a lot of electronics in it. It's not just your basic Volkswagen Beetle that has 34 horsepower and, you know, everything's air cooled. Like, everything is relying on a computer. Your phone is a computer, of course. So it's not just EVs that would be affected in a worst case scenario.
In other words, it's even worse than I thought, but at the same time, it doesn't matter. Thank you very much.
Yeah, don't let it stop you.
okay, let's move on to Linda. Linda, do you want to unmute yourself? Hold on.
Okay, I did it.
Perfect.
I might have to shut myself off if the dog starts to bark. I have a specific question. I've had 3 Priuses. The middle one was a plug-in, and it only charged. It was one of the first ones. It only went to 8 miles, so I didn't use it. If I buy another one after I get rid of this one, I have a plug outside my condo, which is a townhouse, and I don't want to pay $3,500 or $1,500 to install what they want us to put an individual charging at my parking space. And I want to be able to run a 120 cord from the car 10 feet across the little sidewalk to my plug in the front of my townhouse. Now, nobody's going to allow me to run a wire across that sidewalk unless somebody makes a special rule, like they did with the satellites on the roofs. You know, they always disallowed those, and then the government came along and said you can't. So I dig a little trench in between the pavers on the sidewalk or something like that, because I don't really want to spend the $3,500 or the $1,500 to put a charger in front of my car when I could use my household current, and I have 220 also. So I'm looking for a law or a rule or something that says you can't stop me from doing this. You got to figure it out with me. So our condo association, it's 118 units, is starting to talk about this. There may be only 2 of us that are talking, but I just wondered how people feel. Like, we're talking about changing the rules and making things easier. And I just want to know if other people feel the same way. Thank you.
Mal, do you want to take this a crack first?
Yeah, I would love to. Well, so first of all, that kind of experience is really common, not just in New England, but across the country. And so lots of states have passed what are called right to charge laws, which are a bit of a misnomer because it doesn't automatically give everyone the right to charge. But what those laws do is essentially say that condo associations, homeowners associations, and other groups like that can't say no or delay the installation of a charger just based on nothing. Like, if you are willing to, you know, dig that trench and pay for the costs of that, to have it be, you know, not covering the sidewalk so that you can charge your car, then you should be able to. Unfortunately, Rhode Island doesn't currently have a law like that on the books. But that is something that Green Energy Consumers is looking into to pass or support in the future, because we know that that is a really critical tool to help people like yourself in that position. So I would say you're doing the right thing by starting the conversation and bringing this issue to the attention of other people who can potentially make a policy change within your condo association if you can get enough people to agree. But for right now, there aren't a lot of great legal tools to kind of help you in that fight, but hopefully there will be soon. But I would love to stay in touch so that, you know, if we do try and change this law in Rhode Island, we could, you know, remain connected and help you in this process, because either way, it's probably going to be a multi-year conversation, depending on how often your association meets.
Linda, you're muted.
I just wanted to say I'm in Mass. There just seems to be a lot of discussion here about Rhode Island, which isn't that far away. And I kind of think that sounds like they're together, but
yeah, sorry about that. That's just my Rhode Island brain because I'm in Rhode Island. But yes, same thing applies in Massachusetts. Massachusetts, I don't believe, has a right to charge law, but it might be included in the big Senate bill that just passed a few weeks ago. So I will double check and can get back to you on that. I apologize for being focused on Rhode Island.
And Mal also came out with a very handy, what would you call it, tool for condo associations and people who live in other multi-unit dwellings to convince the owners or property managers to actually put charging stations in place and how that could benefit the condo association or the apartment building. And so we can also send that along in the follow-up email. Lawrence, you had your hand up. What was your question?
I have a couple of questions and comments. I just had 22 Q solar panels installed this past year, but the physical install did not go well, and it's currently idling, waiting for proper install. However, the idea being able to charge. I mean, the idea of driving on, literally driving on sunshine is so appealing. And the thing about having the system go down, all the computer, the whole world computer networks getting trashed, having a simple, I mean, I love primitives too, and just having that simple solar system that can be disconnected from the grid and attached to your car so that when the sun is shining, you're going to get power and be able to share it like Jenna does, saying that this is, it's not really free power, but it's available at the time. And so that's one question / comment. We have I'm a member of Green Hudson, and Tom Green is running for the Light and Power Board. So there's another issue regarding green credits, and so I'm going to I'd like to talk with someone regarding the value of produced electricity during different seasons and times of the day, because my roof is west facing. So I'll be producing during peak, and in some way I'd like to be compensated if I'm producing rather than consuming during peak. So that's a question for another time. Thank you.
Okay, I can't say that we are solar experts here, but if anyone wants to comment, they are free to do so. Anyone else have any other questions? Peter Haney?
Yeah, so I just want to go back about the previous question about, I think Linda had that. There is a law in Rhode Island for multifamilies that they need to start converting over to having charging stations for, it's like a certain amount for every number of units. I am in a group, I am in real estate, and I am in a group of Rhode Island real estate investors. And that's come up, and some of them, they start flipping out anytime, anything comes down the pike that they have to spend $1 more than they're spending. So I just put it out there and I said, if anyone has any questions about it, what kind of charging stations, all that, just feel free to reach out to me, which I had a few people that did. They wanted to get a jump on it. I haven't heard much about it, so I don't know. I think that bill passed last year in the last session. Does anybody, Mel, do you know anything about that particular law?
Yes, yeah, so that's a bill that Green Energy Consumers has supported both last year and this year. It did not pass. It had a few really good hearings, but wasn't signed into law. Both hearings in the House and Senate, I thought, went really well this year. And the heads of each committee really liked the bills. And so it's possible that those move forward in the future, but it's not the law quite yet.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so this is a similar question from the chat. Dave asks, what are the options to charge the car if the distance between your car and the outlet is, say, 50 feet? Should they purchase an extension cord? Who wants to answer?
Well, first of all, you cannot use an extension cord to attach it to your charging cable for your car. Just every manual that I've seen says do not use an extension cord. So you'll have to get a 50-foot cord that's specifically engineered to charge an electric vehicle. My car came with a cord that's about 11 feet long, and it has a NEMA plug on one end, and then I can unscrew that and just quickly put on an adapter to plug it into my regular 110 outlet. So I'm just responding saying don't use an extension cord.
No, perfect.
Yep.
Yeah, it's generally unwise. It can work, but I wouldn't want to rely on it. Certainly not for regular charging. The optimal way to charge an EV is with a 240 volt line. So the best option in that sort of situation would be to have an electrician come out and run a 240 volt line to like a post that would be much closer to the car, and install ideally an EVSE with proper weather rating like NEMA 3R or NEMA 4 on the post, and then it's right there next to the car. That's the best way to do it, but that's going to cost money because you got to hire the electrician and run 50 feet of 240 volt cable, which is going to be kind of expensive. Not like $50,000 expensive, but you'll probably pay at least $2,000 for that sort of thing.
The other thing to think about is the charging station that you have, the EVSE. Some of them come with just a 10-foot cord, to plug in, and other ones go as far as 25 feet. So get the longest one you can get.
Yep.
Linda, do you have a follow-up question?
I'm wondering about this Tesla business, and the chargers aren't what the J2 that the Priuses use. And I've just seen so many of these Tesla chargers, and I'm kind of pissed that they weren't made to be compatible with everything else. I mean, it's like the Betamax and VHS routine. And I just wondered if they're foreseeing adapters, or we'll all be able to use all of them, because there's probably 20 Tesla chargers within 5 or 10 miles of me, and maybe 3 of the J2, if that's the right word.
Yeah. Well, there are adapters available, and it depends on whether you're talking about level 2 charging, which would be the J1772 adapters that most people have at home, or most current EV owners other than Tesla owners have J1772 EVSEs at home, or the DC fast charging, which would be either the Tesla supercharger or the CHAdeMO, which is kind of going away, or the CCS, which is an expansion to J1772. And there are adapters for the level 2, so you can plug a Tesla into a J1772 EVSE. And last I heard, every Tesla ships with such an adapter. Tesla's getting cheap about these things, so I'm not entirely sure that's true today. And there are adapters you can buy that go the other way. So if you own like a Chevy Bolt, you can plug into a Tesla level 2 EVSE with one of these adapters. It costs, I don't know, $50 or $150, somewhere in there. For the DC fast charging, there are adapters for Teslas to let them charge on CHAdeMO, or CCS kind of. There's a third-party one, and there's talk that Tesla has released one in South Korea. There's talk that it will be available in the United States. Going the other way, if you own a Bolt or whatever and you want to charge at a Tesla supercharger, that's not currently possible in the United States. But Tesla has said that they will make that possible. The last I heard, they were talking about using adapters for that too. Personally, I'm skeptical that I don't think that's a good option, but they may go that way, or they may just start adding CCS plugs on their superchargers. That's still up in the air, but it will probably happen sooner or later. So there is like convergence and adapters and options for this. It's getting better, not worse. So,
But even with how great Tesla superchargers are, they don't always work, right, Amy? Sometimes there's new ones and they just don't work, even though they're really cool and right near your house.
Yeah, that was not fun. I look like an idiot. I tried 3 different stalls. It was a newer gas station that put, I don't know, 10, 15 superchargers in. And I was like, oh, this is great. And I pulled into one, didn't work. And I was like, maybe it's just this one. And I tried all of them and none of them worked. So I decided to fake it and go inside, get a coffee, and leave anyway.
So a thing about the Chevy Bolt using the superchargers that you had mentioned, Rod, I think it was in Norway. I think it's Norway where they started to open that up, and that's sort of like their little test ground. So it might work. As far as the conversion, the adapter, for me, using a Bolt to use a destination charger, a level 2 Tesla charger, the price of that is actually over $200 for that. And I can't see, I don't have the need for it. Like if that was the only thing available, maybe I would buy it. But right now, those prices are pretty high for those. If it were $50, I'd buy it right now. But I'm not going to spend over $200 for that, because I've never, since 2014, had a need or that the Tesla was the only thing available. Although now I'll probably have an issue because I said that out loud.
Yeah, the one for the to plug Teslas into the J1772 is $50 from Tesla. I think the price to go the other way was high, but it's been coming down. I haven't checked it lately, so I'm not sure what the current prices are, but I suspect it's lower than $250 at this point.
Lawrence, you had your hand raised. Anything you wanted to add?
Yes. I have a suggestion to make.
Sure.
Anybody with issues with Tesla and superchargers and availability should tweet.
Yeah.
I'm glad somebody understood that.
Laura, why don't you round us out? We have about a minute left. We'll try to answer your question or comment.
It actually was just like maybe like a suggestion. Could each person that has an EV car say like one or two things that made them choose that particular brand or model or whatever, for those of us who are like all over the place just looking?
Sure. Xavier, why don't we start with you?
It was like one of the best deals on the Drive Green program.
That can be it. We're just amazing and got you a great deal. That's fine.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, great deal. And as far as like models that were like within that like same range, I'd say it was like one of the most competitive. And then I went to Quirk Chevy and Braintree, Mass, and test drove one, and that was it.
Perfect. All right, Peter Viner Brown, you're next.
Well, my current car is a 21 Leaf, which I leased when the lease on my other Leaf ran out, and I got a short lease because the choices for electric vehicles are not very good in North America. If you compare with Europe and China, we don't have much of a choice. So I got a short lease on the Leaf because I'm hoping in a year's time we'll have better choices, and the availability and the supply chain issues will be over, and there'll be more choices than we have now.
Okay, this is a speed round. Amy, you're next.
I bought my car because I think it's really cool looking. There's a bunch of funny features in it, and for the charging network.
Perfect. Charles?
I bought the Polestar because I've owned Volvos before, and I'm impressed with their safety record. And I was also happy that Volvo has made a commitment, Polestar's made a commitment to sustainability. And as I said, the interior is all recycled fishing nets and plastic bottles. And truthfully, when I first saw the car, it looked to me like an electric muscle car. That's why I bought it.
Perfect. Okay, Peter Haney.
Price. It was an unbelievable price on my first Bolt, which was a lease. And then the second one, I bought used. Again, it was price. It was right before used car prices were really went high. But the second reason I would say is the range, because it was over 200 miles per charge. And the one negative thing is the charging speed. It was great way back then, but now everything charges faster.
Gotcha. Gina?
I got my first Leaf, which I called the Bubble, because I just loved the way it looked. It was just so much fun to drive. It was also affordable. And since I live in a city, I don't have a garage. The car lives on the street. I didn't want something that was going to attract a whole lot of attention. So the Leaf fits the bill.
Perfect. And last but not least, Rod.
I currently drive a 2019 Tesla Model 3, and I got that for two main reasons. One is road trip ability, which is a combination of range and DC fast charging ability, and also because it's got software updates over the air, which have worked out pretty well for the most part, although I'm not happy with the latest user interface changes. Before that, I drove a 2019 Chevy Volt plug-in hybrid, And I got that as kind of an interim car because things were changing so rapidly, and I knew that in 2 years there'd be much better options available than there were at that time. So I leased that for 3 years.
Perfect. I see 2 raised hands. We are over time, so if you have like one quick thing to say, please do. Lawrence and then Chris.
Okay, I just wanted to mention what my car was. I purchased a used Kia Soul EV, a 2016, after its lease ran out. It was a really good price and low mileage, and I'd been looking at that particular model for a long time because I love the quirkiness and the simplicity at the same time of the body lines. And I didn't need any more. I don't need any more range than a 40 or 50 mile round trip at the most.
Perfect. And then Chris, go ahead.
I bought a Tesla Model 3 in November of 2019. I'd spent a year researching it. The upfront cost was quite a bit, but I figured out that, you know, for the amount of time I'm going to have it, it's cheaper than a Toyota.
Perfect.
So, and I've been very happy.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for sharing your experiences, and a special shout out to all of our panelists today. I really appreciate you coming and chatting with all of us. We'll have another one of these again soon, and we look forward to it. Have a good rest of your day, everybody.
Thank you all.
When I communicate these results to public audiences, I think it's really important to talk to them about being able to talk about what's happening with their friends as one of the most important things that they can do.
Knowing what I know about the science and the projections, that puts me into a state of grief.
Because sometimes you hear this information, it's scary, and you kind of shut down, and you either go into a denial phase or depression, and I've been there. I've been depressed about these results many times.
I feel it personally. I have a new granddaughter, first granddaughter. She's 10 months old now.
And I almost feel like we need to have this team of, psychologists or therapists go into communities that are dealing with climate change to allow people to process all of these emotions.
The lost opportunities, the displacement, the loss of a world that we as a species have known since our beginning.
It's not fair for us as scientists to come in and say, this is what we know, this is what's happening, and this is what you have to do, without allowing people to emotionally respond to that information. And for me, keeping myself out of the depression mode is in large part engaging in solutions. And for me, part of that solution is educating people and helping them reach that point of acceptance about reality, not acceptance as in giving up, oh, there's nothing we can do, or it's so bad, it's horrible, but acceptance that the future is going to be different, and not to fight that feeling anymore, but to accept that feeling and then move a step past that and say, well, how do we want this to play out?
There's no question that the #1 control knob for how our cryosphere is going to change is humans.
The future is not just a place that we get to go to. It's a place that we get to create together. The future is not written yet. We get to choose that pathway.
Is anger appropriate?
Yes. That's a good source of energy. You can channel that energy of anger into some very productive action. But it's productive only after you've reflected on the anger and where it's coming from and where it's directed.
We are nowhere near a point where we should put our heads in the sand or throw up our hands and feel that there's not something we can do. Absolutely, there are many things we can do, and indeed what we do will be the primary determinant of what things look like in the future.
So instead of looking at those graphs and thinking, that's our destiny, we can say, no, we can make a choice and choose a different pathway.
I understand that we can sometimes feel despondent and feel like nothing, it's out of our hands. There's nothing that we can do. But that is not, as somebody who works with this system, over the past 10 years I've been working in permafrost. That's not the impression that I have.
We are really in the first step of what is going to be a very long process, because these ice sheets may take hundreds of years, thousands of years to respond even just to the warming that we've already caused today. And so that's an ongoing journey.
So I really do see a sea change, lots of people from all kinds of different backgrounds getting engaged, realizing that we are causing the problem. That's not reason to despair. That's reason to take hope, because that means we can be the solution, right? If it was something else causing climate change, we wouldn't have anything that we could do about it. Since it's us, it's absolutely within our control to change how we live, to protect the climate system, and ensure a better future.